Hello my crafty friends, this is Monica from Allsewpetite. Welcome back to my channel. If you've been here for a while, you may recognize this project. This is one of my free sewing patterns, the Zip-up Cardholder. I received a lot of requests over the years asking how can I modify this pattern so my cards are secured. I do understand that some people may worry that when you place your cards inside, they may fall out. It never happened to me, but just in case if you want to create modifications, check out my previous video. In previous video, I showed you how to modify the original pattern to add this handy snap connector, so you don't have to worry about your cards falling out anymore, and also how to add a flap to the back slip pocket. So again, if you worry about losing your receipts or other small items that you may want to hold in this pocket, adding a flap is a fantastic solution. In this tutorial, I'm only going to focus on those modifications. So in case if you need help completing the entire project, check out my other video. And now, let's get started. Once you modify the original pattern, like I showed you in the previous video, you will need to cut one card slot from external fabric, one top front panel from external fabric, one top back panel from external fabric, two flaps. I cut mine from external fabric, but if you wish, you can cut one from external and one from your lining fabric. You'll also need to cut slip pocket. This is the modified pattern piece, so you'll need to cut one from external fabric and two from your lining fabric. You will also need to cut one front lining and one back lining from your lining fabric, two snap connectors from your external fabric, one zipper tab from external fabric, and two side panels from external fabric. You will need number 3 zipper. The length is provided in the sewing instructions. You will also need 3 sets of press snaps or magnetic snaps. If, like me, you are using press snaps, then you will need a hole puncher and some tools to set them in. So I have my hand press ready. You'll also need some scissors, snips, a ruler to take some measurements. I like to have a seam ripper on hand, just in case if something goes wrong. You'll need your favorite marking tools and also pins or clips to hold the fabric in place. To begin, take your external slip pocket and your card slots and install the male part of the snaps. So it doesn't matter if you are using metal spring press snaps or magnetic snaps, you can install the male part of the snap right now. If you are using magnetic snaps, you can install the female part of the snap to your flap and your snap connector. So you're going to do that on the lining portion or the portion that is underneath. If, like me, you are using press snaps, you're going to install the female part of the snap after those pieces are assembled. Now we're going to create our card pockets. So make sure you have the fold lines marked on your fabric. Then you're going to take this to the pressing station and, following the sewing instructions, fold the pattern piece as required. Once you've got those pockets top stitched, you can place this piece aside for a sec. Then you're going to take your snap connectors. And if, like me, you're using press snaps, then mark the snap placement on the right side of the fabric. What I also like to do is to draw the stitching line on the wrong side of the fabric, just on one piece. So now I'm going to place those two pieces right sides together, line up the edges and pin or clip them together, just like that. And what I like to do, since my connector is just about 2 centimeters, 3/4 of an inch wide, it's going to be very difficult to stitch that and then use this tiny opening to turn the connector right side out. So what I prefer to do is to just stitch that bottom curved edge. So now you can take scissors and trim the seam allowance by half. If you have pinking shears, you can use pinking shears. I'm just going to use my regular scissors and trim the seam allowance, just like that. Next, you can turn your connector right side out. So just take your time. If you have turning tools, you can use them to help yourself out. If you have rounded edge like me, you want to take your time, make sure everything is nice and neat. Here we go. Then you're going to take this to the pressing station and we're going to fold the straight edges. So my seam allowance is 1 centimeter. So I'm going to fold this by 1 centimeter and press it with my iron. Do that on the other side as well. And repeat that on the other piece as well. Here we go. So what you want to do is to make sure those two pieces are exactly the same width. So when you place them wrong sides together, the folded edges are aligned. When you are happy with everything, go ahead, use some clips to just keep those edges in place. Then you can take this to the machine and we're going to top stitch the connector around those finished edges. When you are ready, go ahead and install the female part of your press snap. Now you can take your top front panel and your card slots and line up the top panel along the top edge of your card slots. So you can unfold this to keep this out of the way. Then with the right sides facing each other, you're going to place the top panel on top, just like that. Line up the edges and then clip them or pin them together. Here we go. Since we've added some extra fabric to make our connector longer, to give ourselves a wiggle room, what you need to do is to sew this seam in two portions. So don't sew the entire seam because technically this connector needs to go in between, but we don't know at the moment how far it needs to go. So what I like to do is to mark, so I have a midpoint here. I'm going to center my connector and I'm just going to mark where I need to stop. So I'm going to start at the edge, I'm going to sew the seam up to this notch, and then I'm going to start from this notch and finish the seam. And later I'll be able to finish this opening once I figure out exactly how long I need that connector to be. So now we can go to the machine and sew those two seams. Once you've got that stitched, you're going to take your connector and slide it in. So you are placing it between those two pieces, just like that. So right side is facing up. Then what you want to do is to bring the seam allowance down, just like that. So separate those two pieces. So now your connector is wrong side up. If you want to press that flat, then take your card and place it inside that top pocket and refold your pockets, just like that. Next, you will be able to adjust the length of that connector to allow you to close it. So I'm just going to make it a little bit longer, and then I'm going to close that. Here you go. So I'm pretty happy with this length. I might give myself a little bit extra wiggle room. Here you go, just like that. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to open it now, and to ensure that it doesn't move, I'm just going to use a couple of clips just to hold that connector. So next, you can take this to the machine and finish sewing that seam. So make sure your connector is nice and straight, it is centered, and then finish sewing that seam. My connector is nice and secured now, so I can trim the excess fabric, just like that. Then you're going to separate those pieces, press that flat, and then take this to the machine and top stitch along that finished seam. All modifications on the front panel are now completed, so you can take your side panels and finish sewing the front as per sewing instructions. This is how your front panel should look like once it's assembled. Now you can take your flap pieces, and if like me you are using press snaps, make sure you mark the snap position on the right side of the fabric. Then you're going to bring those two pieces right sides together, line them up, clip everything together. Here we go. Next, you can take this to the machine and sew the curved seam. So leave the top edge as it is, do not stitch the top edge. We're going to use it later on to turn the flap right side out. When you are ready, take your scissors or pinking shears and trim the seam allowance by half. So I'm just going to trim it around those curved corners. Here we go. Then you can turn your flap right side out, just like that. When you are happy with everything, take this to the pressing station and press the seam nice and flat. Here we go. Then we're going to take this to the machine and top stitch along that finished seam. Here we go. This is how it should look like. So next you can install the female parts of your snap. Place your flap aside for a second. Then you're going to take your external slip pocket and one of your lining pieces. Place the lining on top, so right sides are facing each other. You're going to line up the top edge, clip it together. Here you go. Then take this to the machine and sew the seam. Bring those two pieces wrong sides together. Press the seam nice and flat and then top stitch along that finished seam. We've added some extra space to our flap in the same way we've done for the connector, just to give ourselves some wiggle room. So what we're going to do is to follow the same steps to try to figure out how far we need to place our flap on the back panel. So to do that, you're going to take your top back panel and the remaining lining slip pocket and place them right sides together. So line up the top edge and clip everything together, just like that. Then you will take your flap, center it, and then you will mark how far you need to sew the seam. So I'm going to stop here and here. So now you can take this to the machine and sew those tiny seams. So next you're going to take your flap, place it in between and slide it inside. So again, remember the right side of your flap is facing up. So I'm going to line it up, and since this is such a large opening, I'm just going to clip that. If you are using clips like me, try to clip it in a way that it is aligned with that 1 centimeter seam allowance. So now we can flip that down, so the seam allowance goes down. Then you're going to take your slip pocket and place it on top. So line up your edges, clip everything together. This can be a little bit awkward now because we have those clips, but now what you want to do is to close those snaps, and this way you will be able to figure out if you need to move your flap up or down. So next you can take this to the machine and finish sewing that seam. So I've got the entire seam now stitched. Next you're going to take this to the pressing station, open the panels, press the seam allowance down, just like that. Then you can take this to the machine and top stitch along that finished seam. Once you've got that top stitch, you can take your slip pocket, place it on top. So you want to line up the top edge of your pocket along the seam, just like that. Clip everything together. Here we go. And then you can baste the pocket to your back panel. These are all modifications I wanted to show you in this tutorial. So to complete the project, simply follow the sewing instructions. Here I have the finished version of the modified zip-up card holder. If you enjoyed this tutorial, let me know in the comments section. Otherwise, subscribe to my channel for similar content. See you next time. Stay crafty, friends.